What are the best rank 1 divine spells in Pathfinder 2nd edition? Which ones are they? And if these spells are divine, do I need a god's permission to use them? Technically yes, as your GM is a god in a way, which makes me one too. What? No, I'm not a narcissist. A god cannot be a narcissist. This is the Dominomicon, authored and hosted by me, Dominic. The Dominomicon is dedicated to all nerdy things, with my current obsession being the TTRPG Pathfinder 2nd edition. In this video chapter, I'm going to go over what I believe are the top 20 rank 1 divine spells for Pathfinder 2e. This is a continuation of my best spells series, where I'm going over all the spell traditions, not Elementalist, and picking the best 20 of each rank in my opinion. I already nailed rank 1 arcane spells, and this time we're going over divine, which is generally seen as the weakest of the traditions. There will be some unavoidable crossover, as some spells are in multiple traditions and are just too good not to mention in multiple lists, but that's just how it is. If you find this video chapter helpful and or enjoyable, please give it a like and consider subscribing, joining as a member, or taking a quick look at my Patreon, especially if you want your name added to the end of this video. Enough rubbish, let's kneel and pray for music. So this top 20 list is going to follow the same rules as the last top 20 spells one, and it's probably a good idea to check that video out first for more info. But anyway, so no mythic spells, all spells are included in no particular order, runners-up are at the end, including all rarities, and I'll be typing each spell: damage, support, control, debuff, and utility. Some spells will have multiple types. I'll be mostly considering spells of your current rank, though heightening will be sort of considered a little bit, and there's going to be more than just damaging spells in this list, and lots of different types, etc. This list is also going to include some traits that are no longer present in post-remastered PF2E, but I'll shout them out anyway, just to be safe. For a quick summary of the divine tradition, it tends to focus on support spells such as healing allies and giving them buffs, and it does get some decent damaging spells as you level up, though they tend to focus on specific enemy types like fiends and undead, etc. Generally, the lower ranks of divine aren't that great at dealing damage, but yeah, it does change as you level up. They get a few utility, control, and debuff spells, but not a great deal, and the divine spell list has the least amount of spells of all the traditions. Right, let's get onto the list itself. Yes, the first entry here is a double-barreled spell because Bless and Bane are pretty similar. Still, I'll go over them separately. Bless is a 2-action spell with the aura, concentrate, manipulate, and mental traits, and is a 15-foot emanation and lasts for a whole minute. Allies inside the emanation gain a +1 status bonus to attack rolls while they're in the emanation, and if you sustain it once per round, you can increase the emanation's radius by 10 feet, and Bless can counteract Bane. Speaking of, Bane is the same action cost, the same traits, but it's a 10-foot emanation, and it targets will saves, and if the enemies fail that will save, they take a -1 status penalty to attack rolls for as long as they are in the area, and again you can sustain it once per round to make it 10 foot larger. So the reason Bless is really good is because it's 2 actions and lasts a whole minute, and you don't have to do anything after that. You just spend 2 actions and boom, any allies within 15 feet of you for a whole minute, which is going to be the pole fight basically, has a +1 to their attack rolls, which is pretty awesome. Of course, if you have a bard with Courageous Anthem, Bless is probably not all that good because Courageous Anthem does the same thing for 1 action, doesn't cost a spell slot, and has a 60-foot emanation. But still, if you don't have a bard, Bless is definitely worth looking into if you're playing a support caster, because that +1 is pretty powerful in this system, as we all know. Comparatively, a -1 with a will save to all attack rolls as long as the enemies are inside that emanation is pretty strong as well. The emanation is a little bit less with Bane, with it only being 10 foot as opposed to 15, but still, it's pretty good to be able to get all enemies to take that -1 to attack rolls, and it does specify enemies, so your allies will be fine with Bane active. And yes, they do sort of counteract each other using the counteract rules, which I'm not going to go over now, but yes, they're both decent spells that take opposite sides of the spectrum from support to debuff. Moving on. It is entirely impossible for me to do a top 20 divine spell list and not include one of the most powerful support spells in the entire system, if not the most powerful support spell. Heal is a 1, 2, or 3 action spell, has the healing, manipulate, and vitality trait, and has either touch range, a range of 30 feet, or a 30-foot emanation. Normally this just heals your allies, but if you choose to target undead with it, whether you do the touch, 30-foot range, or emanation, they have to make a basic fortitude save. So first things first, the 1 action heal only heals for a flat 1d8 at rank 1, which is potentially terrible, but potentially alright. Realistically, most people use this for the 2 action version because it increases the health restored by 8, so it's going to be 1d8 plus 8, which is pretty good, and that 30-foot range is pretty awesome as well. The 30-foot emanation is also very powerful because while it's still that flat 1d8, it's going to target everyone in that area. So if you're getting attacked by undead and some of your party members have lost health, the 3 action heal is incredible because it's not only going to heal your allies, but it's going to damage all those undead as well. Now that's why this spell is so powerful. On top of that, the heightening effects for this thing is kind of crazy. Every single spell rank, it goes up by 1d8, and the 2-action version increases by another 8 on top of that, meaning that when you're casting this at rank 2, it's doing 2d8 plus 16, which is potentially 32 health, and that's a lot. Heal is just incredible, and if it's on any spell list, you should probably grab it immediately. It's going to be incredibly useful to you. As someone who likes to play support and tanky characters, this is actually probably my favorite spell in the whole system. The variable action cost and the ridiculous amount of health restored just makes it the best spell in PF2E, in my opinion. Let's keep on rolling. There's quite a lot of spells in this list that are like the opposites of each other, and Harm is exactly the opposite of Heal. It has the Manipulate traits like Heal, but doesn't have Vitality or Healing, of course. It has Void instead. It has exactly the same action cost for the exact same effects, except that it's Void damage rather than Vitality damage. But this also means that you can use it to heal undead allies if you happen to have any of those. But it's still a really great spell to actually just deal some solid damage, and on average, in most campaigns, you're going to be fighting more living creatures than you are undead ones, thus making this a pretty useful damaging spell. So the downside is obviously in most campaigns your allies are going to be living, so you're going to be harming them as well, but this spell is fantastic for undead campaigns. And yes, I'm aware that I could have double-barreled heal and harm into one listing, but I feel like they're too different for that, plus it's my list, so shut up. Next up. Whatever spell list Fear is on is going to feature in a top 20 because this thing is still just incredible. I already mentioned this in my top 20 arcane spells, so I'll just go over it briefly. This is a 2-action spell with the Concentrate, Emotion, Fear, Manipulate, and Mental traits, and it targets one creature's will. On a failed save, the target is Frightened 2, and on a success, they're Frightened 1. On a crit fail, they're Frightened 3 and Fleeing for 1 round. And Frightened is just an amazing debuff. Frightened 2 is effectively a whole level lower, and even on a successful save, the enemy's still Frightened 1. Grab this spell if you can, because it's just incredible, especially when heightened. Oh, next is another double-barreled spell. Lovely. So first things first, these spells just sound incredible, as in the name of them is incredible. Benediction or Malediction just sounds so awesome. Honestly, that's like 50% of the reason they're on this list. So both of these spells are actually very similar to Bless and Bane, hence why I'm double-barreling them in one ranking. And they function almost exactly the same way, have the same traits and emanations, durations, etc., except they give you a bonus to your AC if you use Benediction, or enemies take a penalty to your AC if you use Malediction with a will save. Effectively, they're exactly the same as Bane and Bless otherwise, so I'm not going to spend a great deal going into them. They also counteract each other, so yeah, very similar. Definitely a good support / debuff spell. Speaking of spells that make it harder to hit your allies, Sanctuary is a 2-action spell with the Concentrate, Manipulate trait that has a range of touch, targets one creature, and lasts for a whole minute. So basically, you cast this on an ally, and every time a creature wants to attack said ally, they have to make that will save, and if they fail, they cannot target your ally, and they lose the action. And that lasts for the whole turn. On a crit fail, they cannot target the creature at all for as long as the spell lasts, and on a success, nothing happens basically. On a critical success, the spell ends. The biggest downside to Sanctuary is that if the target that you cast this on happens to use a hostile action, the spell immediately ends. So ideally, you want to be placing this on something like a healer or a support character, etc., and maybe even just a tank and just tell them to keep their shield raised, etc. I wouldn't class raising a shield as hostile. I'd say it's more defensive, but I guess that depends on your GM. The reason this spell is so good, in my opinion, is because it can completely disrupt an enemy's turn. They could spend a movement action getting up to you, trying to hit you, failing that will save, and then they just have to move away from you and try something else. That's an entire turn lost. And for a spell slot on 2 actions and it lasts a whole minute, that's pretty powerful. Obviously, if they succeed at that will save, it's not so powerful, but they gotta do it each time, remember? Or at least every turn. As long as they don't get a critical success each turn, they gotta make that save. And that's why I think this spell's really good. It's kind of similar to how Concealed and stuff works, except there's probably a high chance of them failing and literally losing an action. It's very good, I like it. Next on the list. This is another one of those spells that I mentioned in my top 20 rank 1 arcane spells video, so I won't spend ages going over it. Enfeeble is a 2-action spell with the Concentrate, Manipulate traits that targets one creature with a Fortitude save within 30 feet. On a fail, they are Enfeebled 2 for a minute, which is a rather long time, so they need to be strength-based for this to actually make a big difference. And if they are, it's just generally a very solid debuff spell, and it's really going to serve you well if you're trying to make enemies weaker, or just make them miss entirely. On deck is... This one is a strange spell that I actually was not aware of until I started looking down the divine list for this particular video. Defended by Spirits is a 2-action spell with the uncommon Concentrate, Manipulate, and Spirit traits. It targets an ally and an enemy within 30 feet, and it can be sustained up to a minute. Each time the enemy that you targeted attacks and damages the ally that you targeted, the enemy takes 1d6 spirit damage. Now, the enemy is aware of these spirits and generally knows probably not to attack that particular target. But I think this is really good at kind of locking down enemies. If you cast this on, say, your tank or something, and your tank is blocking the way for a particular enemy, there's no way they can get around that. You're going to have to attack them, and they're just going to start taking that damage over and over and over again. They do have to damage your ally, to be fair, but still, 1d6 damage for something that's just going to cost you 1 action each turn is really good. I mean, just consider it could be 3d6 every single turn. And there's no save for it. If they hit your ally and they take damage, it just happens. It's great stuff. Right, what's next? This one's a pretty fun one. Purifying Icicle is a 2-action spell with the uncommon Cold, Evocation, and Positive traits. Yeah, those traits are kind of outdated. It has a range of 60 feet and targets one creature's AC because it's a spell attack roll. Why is Fortitude in there? That must be a typo. Come on, Paizo editors, silly sausages. On a hit, this is going to deal 2d6 piercing damage and 1d6 cold damage, so that's effectively 3d6. And if the target's undead, it deals an additional 1d4 vitality damage. Ignore the positive bit. And on a crit fail, the target is going to take double damage, of course, and a minus 10-foot circumstance penalty to its speed for a whole round. Pretty good. It's a solid damaging spell for Divine. 3d6 is really good at such a low level, especially with that range. 60 foot is pretty crazy. Definitely try to pick this one up if you want some solid damage as a Divine caster, though double check with your GM as it is uncommon. Moving on to... Hold on. Wait, this thing doesn't even have the attack trait. So is it a saving throw then? Is this a fortitude based spell, or is this... What is this? Hold on a minute. Please hold while our operator works through this technical issue. Your view is important to us. Please be aware that your view may be recorded for training and... Right, okay, I think this is just a misprint because it doesn't have the 4 degrees of success in there, so I think it's just missing the attack trait and fortitude doesn't need to be in there. Anyway, onwards and hopefully upwards. This one's a funny one in that your GM is forced to create some sort of sacred animal for your deity. Sacred Beasts is a 2-action spell with a Concentrate and Manipulate trait. It has a 30-foot range and has a 5-foot burst, and it's a basic reflex save. This is just going to deal 2d6 damage as your deity summons forth sacred animals to deal either bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage determined by the GM. That's just pretty good, honestly. A 5-foot burst is pretty decent and can potentially hit 4 enemies, and 2d6 is also pretty good too. And it heightens quite well. Every spell rank it goes up by another 2d6. Pretty good spell. Solid damaging one for a spell list that generally doesn't get all that many damaging things at these lower ranks. Next. Just kidding, this one sucks. I mentioned these sorts of spells in the Arcane video, and I imagine I will keep mentioning these as we go on. I think summon spells are potentially quite useful. For the Divine list, you have Summon Undead and a Lesser Servitor. For the lower ranks, it's not going to be massively useful, but as you level up until a certain level cap, they do get pretty powerful because the creatures you can summon have their own abilities, etc. As I always say with summon spells, there's no saving throw. They can potentially hit enemies, they can block things, they can assist your eyes with flanking, etc. Now, summoning spells are generally pretty good, so long as they don't get one shot, because it can feel a little bit rubbish. But still, even if they get one shot, that means you spent 3 actions to waste one of your enemy's actions, which could be potentially a worthy trade-off. Plus, if they move to attack as well, they just lost 2 actions. I think summon spells get a bad rap, but I actually don't think they're that bad. And next spell. I love me some support and tanky abilities, so this one was a no-brainer for me. Shielded Arm is a 2-action spell with a Concentrate, Manipulate, and Metal traits. It has a range of touch, targets a willing creature, and lasts for a minute or until expended. Basically, you're just giving yourself or an ally a shield, and they can use this shield to gain a +2 circumstance bonus to AC, and they can shield block. It doesn't actually specify whether or not they need the shield block reaction to shield block. I just imagine they don't need it. It has a hardness of 4 with 15 hit points, and you actually have to destroy it entirely because it doesn't have a broken threshold, unlike a shield. That means a steel shield with 20 hit points will get broken at 10, so that means this thing's 15 hit points is actually slightly better than a steel shield, aside from the hardness being 1 lower. So yeah, I think it's a pretty decent spell. It heightens every 2 ranks with all of its stats doubling. Definitely a worthy spell if you want to target someone who doesn't have a shield, such as your Barbarian, for example, if they're taking a few nasty blows. Really good support spell, I like it. More Divine spells, please. On the face of it, this one isn't all that good until you read one of the traits. Admonishing Ray is a 2-action spell with the attack, necromancy, and most importantly, non-lethal trait. It targets one creature within 60 feet and is a spell attack roll. Basically, it does 2d6 bludgeoning damage. And you're allowed to say whether it feels like a punch or a slap, which I kind of like the idea of slapping someone with a spell. But the best part of this spell is the non-lethal trait. They're going to take that 2d6, or if you crit, it's going to be double that, which is pretty good. But the non-lethal thing makes this really good. 2d6 isn't amazing, but it's pretty good and actually has a decent chance of finishing off an enemy, especially if you want to keep them alive. And when you heighten it, it goes up by another 2d6 every rank, which makes it a pretty solid damaging spell if you don't want to kill your enemies. Let's keep going. This is another spell that featured in my Arcane Spells video, so I'll keep this brief. Command is a 2-action spell with the Auditory, Concentrate, Linguistic, Manipulate, and Mental traits. It targets one creature with a will save within 30 feet and lasts until the end of the target's next turn. As I said in the Arcane Spells video, this is really good at locking down enemies and potentially making them run away, which is going to cost them actions. It can be very good if you're just trying to take away enemy actions, and there's no incapacitation trait, which makes it potentially useful against bosses. A lovely spell on any list. Onwards to the next one. This is another spell that I didn't see until I tried to make this video. Cycle of Retribution is a 2-action spell with the uncommon, enchantment, and mental traits. It has a range of touch and targets one creature's will. If they fail that will save the first time each round when they take a hostile action, they're going to take 1d4 mental damage. That's whether they hit, miss, or do anything that's even slightly hostile, they're going to take that damage. On a crit fail, it's each time they make one of those hostile actions. On a success, unfortunately, it only lasts for one of those hostile actions. Of course, on a crit success, nothing happens, but still, it's pretty good for them to regularly be taking 1d4 mental damage on that fail. Also, it heightens every spell rank by another d4 worth of damage. Pretty good. Downside is, obviously, being touch range could be a little bit tricky, and you do have to sustain it each round. But it's still pretty solid, especially if you manage to get this off on creatures that have lots of attacks, like dragons, for example. Next spell in the prayer book. This is one of those great spells if you have a clever brain and high IQ, aka not me. Ventriloquism is a 2-action spell with the Auditory, Concentrate, Illusion, and Manipulate traits that last for 10 minutes. Basically, you can make your voice sound like it's coming from somewhere else within 60 feet, and you can change that location as much as you like. Once heightened, the duration increases to an hour, and you can change the tone, quality, and other aspects of your voice. They do get to make a perception check to disbelieve your illusion, but this is a sort of spell that's good for out-of-combat situations, like making an enemy run towards a ledge and then having your fighter or barbarian push them off. It's a fun utility spell with quite a lot of uses if you use your brain right. Honestly, I think distraction is probably the best way to use this, and there's a lot of use cases for that. More scripture, please. Another spell I mentioned in my Arcane Spells because it's too good not to mention in my opinion. Elysian Whimsy is a 2-action spell with the uncommon, enchantment, incapacitation, and mental traits with a range of 30 feet that targets one creature's will. I'll just go over this briefly as I already mentioned it, but basically you roll a 1d4 to determine its effects, and it can do a bunch of stuff. Generally, you're going to be forcing enemies to waste actions doing stupid things. Number 4 is probably one of my favorites on there because you have to give away wealth, which is just hilarious to me, but I did mention this already in my last spells video, so more spells, please. Every good religion needs a choir. Concordant Choir is a 1-to-3 action spell with the Concentrate and Sonic traits with a range of 30 feet that has differing targets depending on your action cost, and targets basic fortitude. If you do the 1-action version, it deals 1d4 damage to a single enemy, which is kind of pointless unless they're weak to Sonic. If you do the 2-action version, it's 2d4 to all creatures in a 10-foot burst, which is pretty cool. 3-action is 2d4 to all creatures in a 30-foot emanation, which could be bad for your allies, but is pretty awesome otherwise. Sonic damage is rarely resisted in PF2E, so that makes it pretty decent, and I definitely say the 2-action one is better than the other ones. Plus, it heightens rather well, 1d4 for the 1-action and 2d4 for the other versions. Not an amazing amount of damage, but it's still a pretty good area of effect damaging spell for a spell list that doesn't really get them, at least at this rank. The next spell from the heavens is... This one's a bit of a weird spell, or at least the name is anyway. Beseech the Sphinx is a 2-action spell with the rare Concentrate and Manipulate traits. It has a range of 30 feet, and you can target a creature other than yourself and last for 10 minutes. Basically, you choose a skill and a saving throw, and the target gains a +1 to both of those. The part of this that's really good is the fact that when you heighten it to 4th, it turns into a +2, and at 7th, it's a +3. Getting a +3 on a saving throw for 10 minutes is kind of mental, but even the +1 at the low levels is pretty good as well. It is a rare spell, of course, you need permission from your GM to use this. I don't really see why not. It seems pretty fun, and it's a pretty decent support spell in my opinion. Last but not least, this is another decent one with great heightening. Protection is a 2-action spell with a concentrate and manipulate traits, targets one willing creature with a range of touch, and lasts for a minute. Quite simply, this gives said willing creature a +1 status bonus to AC and saving throws, and at third, your allies within a 10-foot emanation of the target get affected too. A +1 is not game-breakingly good, but it is pretty decent, and the fact that it lasts for a whole minute is the cherry on top. This is more of a crit saver than a damage saver, I'd say, and when the enemy misses one of those crits by one, you're going to be happy your ally had this one ready for you. Okay, onto the runners-up. Like the arcane spell list, we have Runic Body, Runic Weapon, and Mystic Armor in here for some little buffs that are pretty good. Flens is pretty nice if you want to do some horrific touch damage to someone that actually strips the flesh from the bone, which is pretty nasty. I think it's more thematic than particularly useful. 2d6 is pretty solid, and on a crit fail they bleed as well. Nice. A Thoughtful Gift can basically save an ally in action if it's something like a healing item, or you could send them like an Alchemist Fire if you learn that the enemy's weak to that damage type. Plus, there's some pretty cool roleplay moments that you could be used for, and the heightening effects are cool as well. Putrefy food and drink, and also cleanse cuisine can be potentially useful depending on your campaign and what it is that you're getting up to. And create water also, in that same sense, can be particularly useful. Obviously, the putrefy is great if you want to poison someone, you a nasty, nasty person. And that's my top 20 divine list for the rank 1 spells. It's not all that impressive, quite frankly, at such a low rank. They do have some incredibly powerful spells in there, there's just not that many of them. And that means that creating a top 20 list was kind of challenging, because a lot of the spells here are just kind of meh, or they're just not all that impressive. It's a bit of a complaint I've had about Divine for quite a while. We got pretty decent expansions to the spells with certain books. So Arcane got Secrets of Magic, Occult got Dark Archive, and then Primal got Rage of Elements. But then we got War of Immortals, and we still didn't really get any extra spells to the Divine list, and we're still kind of waiting for that. Divine list needs more spells, please, Paizo. Give us more, we love them. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope this video made picking spells with a fresh character a bit easier. And please let me know in the comments if I missed any of your favorite Divine spells, or any that you would have in your list instead. If you found this video chapter helpful and or enjoyable, please give it a like and consider subscribing, joining as a member, or taking a look at my Patreon. Before we finish up, I'd like to take a moment to thank my members and archivists: Max Magnus 20019, Ozzy Smith, Shard, Sirakia, Nikola Milenkovic, and Kyle Travis, and patron and archivist Clash. Thank you as ever, guys, for all of your support. It means the world to me, truly. But for now, this is Dominic of the Dominimi Nominimi Nominimi Nimini Domicom, wishing you a fond farewell, and until next time, goodbye.